Today we'll be glazing our bisque-fired ceramic wall pockets. You should have your piece already returned to you, and on your desk you're going to have some water. You'll have a paper towel, some brushes, and a paper plate to use as a palette. We have several fun new colors to use for this project, so please check out what your volunteers have brought in and figure out which colors you want to use on your piece. For my piece, I'm going to start out with this light green glaze color, and I'm going to squeeze out about a quarter size onto my palette because we can always request more glaze, but since we're sharing with the rest of our schoolmates, we don't want to be wasting and going through a lot of glaze with each color. I've chosen a larger brush because when you're doing a bigger section, the larger brush will get more coverage, and make sure to dab it in there so that you will get all those little nooks and crannies that your texture created. Best practice is to cover your piece in 3 layers of glaze. So once your first layer looks chalky, you start to apply your second layer. And once that looks chalky, you are then going to move on to doing your 3rd layer of glaze. While glazing my piece, one of the holes I created for hanging it has filled in with glaze. So to fix this, I'm going to grab one of my smaller brushes that will fit into that hole, and I'm going to wiggle it around a bit to clear out the glaze. If I left it there, that would actually seal over and completely close off that hole, making me unable to hang my piece after the firing process. All right, I have all 3 layers of glaze that I want for the base color, and so I'm going to let this dry until I move on further to do a little bit more decoration. Once my piece looks dry and I know I can hold it without smearing glaze all around, I've decided I'm going to take a small sponge and water, and I am going to lightly dab off some of the glaze from the top textured parts, leaving the 3 layers down in those crevices that the crochet piece made on mine. I want that to stay in there, but I want to thin out a little bit of the glaze on the top really rough edges. So I'm going to do that with a sponge and some water, and it can get a little bit messy. Once my base layers are dry again, I'm going to move on to decoration. And I'm starting off with a blue color, and I'm really capitalizing on these circles that were left behind when I used the crochet doily as means of texture for my piece. So I'm going to use that movement that is already there and amplify it by adding blue dots along it. Once I finish with the blue dots, I want them to dry a bit, because if I leave them wet while I keep handling it to add in black dots, I'm going to end up spreading that blue paint all around in places that I did not want it to be in. So you'll notice as I'm adding in the black, the blue is dry. A really interesting feature about the black glaze I'm using is that it's speckled black glaze. So once it goes through the kiln firing process, that color will have little speckles of color within it that do not melt within the kiln, and adds a little bit of spark to the design. The reason we use glaze is to seal our pottery. Not only does it make it stronger, but it makes it where water can't soak in and start deteriorating our piece. So because of that, I want to make sure all of my piece is glazed. That means including the inside. And once again, I'm choosing to use the speckled black glaze so that it will make a really cool texture inside and be just as interesting as the outside. While I'm waiting for the inside of my piece to dry, I'm going to go ahead and continue finishing the decoration on the outside, which includes some texture I made with the stylus and filling in my name that I wrote on the back. Technically, I could stop there, but I'm that person who can always find more ways to add just a little bit more detail and a little bit more quirkiness to my piece. I do truly enjoy glazing, so being able to experiment with details and colors is something that I find great enjoyment out of, and I hope you guys do too. Now's the time to check over your project to look for any places where you might have skipped glazing. I noticed that I forgot to put glaze here on the lip. Had I left it that way, it would be hard and sharp there, and water could still permeate into my ceramic piece. So I want to make sure that I have every part of my wall pocket covered in glaze. Any place that does not have glaze or that it's too thin, it will feel a bit rough. It won't have that nice, glossy, shiny texture. Now, sometimes we do leave areas completely unglazed because that's part of our design choice. So check your piece over, see if there's any area that you might need to put a little bit of extra glaze on. So far, I love how this has turned out. But as a final experiment, I'm going to make a wash out of my blue glaze and a little bit of water. I want a very thin mixture here so that I can take my brush and hold it up to my piece and have it drip down. So I can't really control how it's going to go. The gravity is just going to pull it down and put it across my piece. And I'm going to do this until I feel like I have enough and get kind of a cool look to it, but I really won't know how this is going to turn out until after I get it out of the kiln. So have fun with this if you do try it. But please note that this is messy. Here, you can see how much glaze I now have on my hands. And if I start handling my piece with really dirty, glazy hands, I'm going to end up getting color in places where I don't want color. So I really need to go and wash my hands up. With clean hands, I'm now going to show you how mine has turned out and dried. And we'll see what this looks like, I guess, in a little bit. But when I choose these projects, I make a ton of examples. So here are the ones I made as examples so that I could experiment with color, experiment with new glazes we have. I made these while trying to figure out our project, and I wanted to show you some of the different choices that I made and what they look like after they go through the kiln. From chalky glaze into this awesome shiny wall pocket. I love how those drips turned out, and you could see the speckling in the black glaze that I used. On this next one, I actually used a dark blue speckled. So when you look inside, you'll see all these cool white dots that made it through the kiln firing process. I love all these new fun colors. And we also have, I believe, 2 different pink speckled glazes as well, which I used inside of this one. So enjoy yourself, have fun with all the colors, and I can't wait to see your creations. Here are a few more beautiful examples created by our Pause Art volunteer team to hopefully bring you some inspiration today. In case you can't remember all of the tips and tricks I discussed while glazing my project, I wanted to give you a quick reference guide so that you can see the things that are important to remember while glazing your project.